This presentation focuses on attraction and the different qualities and characteristics and environmental factors that promote our attraction to other people. One of the things that you're going to learn right off the bat is that there are different forms of attraction. So we won't just be talking about romantic attraction, but other types of attraction, like the types of things that make you want to be friends with someone. So let's get started. Put simply, attraction is a force that draws people together. It can occur very quickly or it can develop more gradually over time. You can be physically attracted to someone instantly, right? So that's an experience where maybe you have butterflies in your stomach, your heart is pounding in your chest, but you can also grow to like someone romantically or platonically after getting to know them, spending some time together, and recognizing you're compatible with one another in various ways. You can also be attracted to someone who isn't necessarily attracted to you, and vice versa, right? Someone can be attracted to you, but you don't feel the same way about them. So, attraction can be kind of hard to describe. You know you feel positively about someone, but maybe you're struggling to explain exactly why you feel that way. So, attraction is kind of this complex interpersonal phenomenon. The characteristics that attract us to others can vary widely from person to person, but there are some fundamental reasons that help to explain how and why attraction develops, which is what we will explore in more detail as we progress through this lecture. Let's begin by defining interpersonal attraction specifically, which is a motivational state in which a person is predisposed to think, feel, and act in a positive manner toward another person. So, this definition is very broad, but that's good for us because it encompasses a number of things that might attract us to another person. So, you'll see the four main forms of interpersonal attraction, starting with physical attraction. When you are physically attracted to someone, you are drawn to the way that they look. So, that could be their hair, their eyes, their physique, so on and so forth. When you are socially attracted to someone, basically you want to hang out with them, you want to be friends with them. Maybe this is somebody who gives off that vibe of like, I'd really like to grab a drink with that person. When you experience task attraction, you want to work with another person to accomplish instrumental goals. So this could be things like collaborating on a class project, right? So maybe this person is smart and creative, or maybe they're a good public speaker. And so that makes them highly attractive to accomplish a certain task. The things that motivate task attraction might look very different from the things that motivate physical and social attraction. So I'll give you a personal example of this. I had two really good friends in high school, and we took a number of classes together. In my chemistry class, we had to get lab partners. So obviously, a group of three wasn't possible. And even though these girls were my friends, I really didn't mind letting them partner up and work together. And then finding a different partner because I honestly wanted to work with someone who would put the same amount of effort into the assignments. And I quite honestly, I didn't think they would do that. On the flip side, my eventual lab partner was not really someone I wanted to socialize with outside of school. And so that's one example of the different characteristics that can motivate different forms of attraction. You want to work with someone for various reasons, but maybe, really don't want to be friends with them. Or you want to be friends with someone, but maybe you just really don't want to work with them. Finally, there is sexual attraction. So when you're sexually attracted to someone, you want to engage in sexual activity with them. Usually, this is usually accompanied by feelings of sexual arousal when you are around that person. And sexual attraction might overlap with romantic attraction and physical attraction, but it could also be, certainly, I'm sure everyone knows, its own kind of distinct thing. Fatal attraction is the name of a 1987 movie starring Glenn Close and Michael Douglas. But it's also a relationship phenomenon in which the qualities you were originally attracted to in a partner eventually become things that you don't like, which often leads, unfortunately, to the end of the relationship. Diane Felmley is the researcher who, kind of the first person to study this, and she began looking into this in the mid 90s and actually continues to find support for this phenomenon. She originally identified three common patterns of fatal attraction, which are fun to foolish, strong to domineering, and spontaneous to unpredictable. So, fun to foolish is when you're originally attracted to someone because they're a fun person. They're always up for a good time. Nothing's too serious, right? But over time, this becomes problematic because you realize maybe they're immature, and they can't take anything seriously, which makes it pretty difficult to achieve goals or to get things done or maybe even to move forward with the relationship. Strong to domineering is when you find someone attractive because they're confident, they're assertive, they're opinionated, right? They're unafraid to be outspoken and be themselves. But over time, those behaviors could manifest in more domineering ways where the person is very aggressive, maybe they're controlling, or maybe they're inconsiderate. And finally, spontaneous to unpredictable is when you find someone attractive because they really live in the moment and they keep you on your toes. You never really know what to expect, and everything is really exciting. But then you realize, because of all that kind of excitement and spontaneity, they're pretty unreliable. There's no certainty or predictability in their behavior, and that can make it really difficult to make and keep plans and move toward commitment. So, Diane Felmley was interviewed very recently. You can read about that in a BBC article that I linked on Husky CT. But she explains this very simply by saying it's a different interpretation of the same quality. It's a negative way of looking at a positive trait. And then she gives an example of someone who said they were attracted to their partner because she was considerate, but then complained that she said sorry too much, right? So it's basically taking that one quality and viewing it in a positive light at the beginning of the relationship, and then viewing it more negatively toward as the relationship progresses. So, to maybe put this into more modern terms, sometimes we are attracted to someone initially, but the things that attracted us to them eventually give us the ick, which can be, but isn't always, a death sentence for the relationship. So you can read more about this in that article linked on Husky CT. It's a very short, quick read, and it's pretty interesting, so I definitely recommend checking it out. Because there are so many things that influence our attraction to others, an easy way to examine them is to organize them into four general groups. So, first we have personal qualities, and these are the characteristics that you bring to the interaction. So, these are things like your personality, your expectations, your needs, so on and so forth. There are also qualities that the other person brings to the interaction, which includes all of the items in the personal qualities list, because that person is an individual as well, plus physical attractiveness and whether or not we perceive them to be hard to get. So there are some additional characteristics to consider in thinking about qualities of the other. Third, we have qualities of the pair, which reflect the chemistry or the synergy between two people. So, in what ways are these two people similar, and in what ways are they different? And we also have the actual physical and social environment. Um, so, feedback from friends and family, for example, or even the literal setting in which you are interacting. So over the next few slides, I am going to focus on a couple of items from each list that I either find interesting or feel that they need a bit more elaboration. And I'm going to start with personal qualities. So on this in this slide, let's hone in on the two personal qualities that you might not be as familiar with from that previous list. So we have perceptions of reward value as well as expectations. Perceptions of reward value is your perception about the other person's value or how many rewarding qualities they have. And so it sounds like this should go in the qualities of the other category, but this is a perceptual bias that you hold, and it's not based in objective reality, right? So what you believe to be rewarding isn't necessarily the same as what someone else believes to be rewarding. So when we enter into relationships, we hope those relationships will be beneficial in some way. We may hope to find someone who is fun or affectionate or supportive. We may want a relationship characterized by sexual fulfillment or financial stability, whatever. So, in other words, what we're kind of asking ourselves, what will we get out of being in a relationship with this person? And again, those things will differ from person to person, but we tend to be more attracted to people we believe possess more rewarding qualities. The rewards or the benefits outweigh the costs, and this is especially true if you perceive the partner to have more rewarding qualities than other potential partners, right? So you're comparing this potential partner to the other ones out there. We will come back to this idea of reward value when we get to the unit on uncertainty because it is a central construct in expectancy violations theory. We may also let our expectations of others influence the way we treat interaction partners, which then leads them to behave in the way we expect, thereby confirming our expectations. So, for example, if you believe someone will be rude or distant or disrespectful, you might engage with them in a manner that's cold and skeptical, annoyed, so on, before they have a chance to show you who they are. Um, and then they're likely to be rude to you and to avoid you. So it's kind of like a self fulfilling prophecy, but it's your expectations that influence your communication, which then influences the other person's behavior. And expectations we will come back to in the unit on uncertainty because this is an even more central construct in expectancy violations theory. So we will be talking about both of these again later in this semester. Your attachment style also influences who you're attracted to because your attachment style reflects who you or how you view yourself and how you view others, which affect how you then approach relationships and what you expect from them. Attachment styles result from our interactions with our primary caregivers when we're children. And so those relationships are considered to be really pivotal in determining who you expect what you expect from others as you develop. We have an entire unit on attachment later, so I'm going to cut this discussion off here. But attachment theory is actually my favorite theory, and we'll talk through both childhood attachment styles as well as the 4 adult attachment styles, which you can see here. Additionally, your beliefs about relationships can influence who you're attracted to. So we have destiny beliefs and we have growth beliefs. People who hold strong destiny beliefs are more likely to prioritize first impressions. So they're quick to discount a potential partner that they deem to be less than ideal. And they're more likely to pursue someone that maybe they had like a perfect, quote unquote, perfect first encounter with. So this is your stereotypical meet cute scenario, right? So you go into the convenience store after a gas station, right? You've had a tough day. And maybe, just in general, your personal life is not going so well and you've had a string of bad dates. And so, you're feeling kind of bummed and you're browsing the ice cream selection in the frozen foods aisle and you reach for that last remaining pint of Ben and Jerry's. But at that exact moment, someone else is reaching for that pint and then you fall in love, right? So people who hold strong destiny beliefs may believe in soulmates or that people are destined to be together, right? So you'll hear them saying things like it was meant to be. People who hold strong growth beliefs, on the other hand, allow their impressions to build over time and are more likely to recognize that relationships require regular work and maintenance. And that's something else that we will talk in more detail about later on in the semester when we get to our unit on relational maintenance. In addition to your own qualities, qualities of potential partners are going to be important in determining who you find attractive, of course. For better or for worse, we tend to hone in on physical characteristics, at least in initial encounters. And this is because those cues are visual and they are easily accessible, right? So if we don't have any other information to go on, we're probably going to prioritize someone's physical appearance. And then, evolutionarily speaking, some of these visual cues indicate the level of health and availability of this potential partner. I teach this in my nonverbal communication course in a bit more detail, but I'll give you a brief overview of sort of what we know about physical attractiveness. So, first, there is no list of universally attractive traits, but there are some physical characteristics that are highly valued in many cultures. Sexual dimorphism is related to facial attractiveness. And so, this is when an attractive face contains, or we deem a face to be attractive when it contains an optimum blend of masculine and feminine features. And these features are associated with hormone levels. So, for example, people find women across cultures more attractive if they have a combination of immature features and mature features, as well as very feminine features, right? So, the immature features are going to be things like larger, wide set eyes and a smaller nose. Mature features are going to be things like prominent cheekbones and narrow faces, and feminine features are fuller lips, a weaker jawline, smaller chins, right? And the idea here is that these cues suggest higher levels of estrogen and lower levels of testosterone. So they're a combination basically of innocence and fertility. For men, the research is less consistent. Extremely masculine features might make some men appear more dominant, less approachable, or more threatening. So a blend of masculine and feminine features might be preferred. But even that is not consistent across cultures or situations. So when women are at the fertile peak of their menstrual cycle, or if they're seeking short-term relationships, they actually might find more masculine characteristics to be more attractive. And this is, of course, assuming a heterosexual situation. We also think that or proportionality is something that we find attractive, right? And so things like equal thirds from top to bottom, and this could be like from like of your face, right? So if your forehead, for example, if people perceive that to be larger than the other 2/3 of your face, then they may perceive that to be disproportional. So, in other words, like your forehead, your nose, your chin, if those things are too long or too big, people might be more likely to find that unattractive. We appreciate symmetry as well. The research suggests that it appears, or it's an indication rather, of healthiness. We also appreciate averageness. So the more familiar the characteristics are to us, the more symmetrical they are to us, our brain actually processes them more easily because there's nothing distinct or too distracting. We have preferences in terms of, body and physique. So a lower waist to hip ratio is preferred in women, but this is not 100% universal either. And for men, it's more of a V shape. With all that being said, though, biology is not everything. So I've labeled this list of characteristics universal-ish. because that's kind of what the research points to. But all of this is going to be determined by culture as well as your own personal preferences. So I don't think this is like a one size fits all um, kind of situation. Really quickly before I move on, I did not mean to skip over the image of Kylie Jenner on the previous slide. So, in my nonverbal communication course, we talk about an argument that someone made in a think piece that Kylie Jenner possesses this kind of like optimum blend of characteristics that make her particularly attractive, which opens up a conversation about preferences for like naturally occurring characteristics versus ones that have been altered by things like plastic surgery. So, if you're interested, I can give you more information on that, and I can also share the article that talks about this. So, moving on, I'm sure we can all agree that judging someone based solely on their looks is an unfortunate but inevitable aspect of reality. It's not fair to make evaluations of a person based on physical characteristics, but we do it all the time because physical appearance is most salient when we don't have any other information. And in fact, the halo effect explains this phenomenon in which we assume that attractive people have other positive qualities, right? So if someone's attractive, we assume they're also kind and intelligent and honest and competent. Attractive people we know receive preferential treatment across a range of contexts. This is called pretty privilege and it reflects the idea that personal and professional value is tied to attractiveness. So, attractive individuals are more likely to be hired, promoted, and they even receive higher salaries than people who are deemed to be less attractive. So basically what's happening is or well, okay, so what we don't know is this a direct result of their attractiveness or is it a cycle or sort of like a sequence of events, right? So if someone is attractive, people are going to be nicer to them, right? So then that person may feel more confident. And if they feel more confident, it's possible that they also are more likely to pursue opportunities like asking for a raise or asking for a promotion, right? So their appearance based confidence also enables them to kind of pursue the opportunities that they desire and deserve. Um, right? So if people treat you really well, as though you are a likable and intelligent person and you're funny, right? You're likely to feel more confident, be more persistent, and be offered and pursue more opportunities. So, physical attractiveness is what we might call a heuristic or a mental shortcut for other positive traits. You might also be attracted to others because of the potential for rewards, right? So, or rewards just by association. So if you hang out with attractive people, the rewards that they receive kind of spill over onto you in that you may receive more positive attention as well. And this is something called the assimilation effect. So the assimilation effect basically says that another reason we're attracted to attractive people is because we reap some of the benefits of associating with attractive people. And certainly another person's communication skills will impact our attraction to them. And the research here converges around three clusters of communication skills that we tend to find attractive in others. The first cluster of characteristics is related to being kind and caring. Psychologists might refer to this set of characteristics as agreeableness, which you've probably learned about from the Big Five personality measure. So, this is how warm, caring, and altruistic a person is. And across different types of relationships, agreeableness was actually found to be the best predictor of attraction. Not surprisingly, we also like to hang out with people who are sociable and fun. So, people who are extroverted, expressive, open, outgoing, these are all things that we appreciate in others. It's important to note that it's not just extroversion that people are attracted to, but the ways in which extroverted people communicate. So we would call these latent constructs. So the overarching construct is extroversion, but more specifically, extroverted people are talkative. They communicate their ideas well. They appear relaxed and comfortable when communicating. They seem to enjoy interacting with others. They are enthusiastic and nonverbally expressive. And so those ways of communicating are things that we might find particularly attractive. Um, can this be overwhelming? Yes, of course it can, right? From personal experience and from reading the research, there is something to be said about the ways that extroverted people can make others feel comfortable, seen, included, and able to be themselves, but they can also be a bit overwhelming at times, right? So if you feel like your energy is drained, that is a normal phenomenon. We also like people who are composed and confident and competent. These people communicate without showing much nervousness, and they tend to be seen as particularly knowledgeable. Now, of course, if someone goes out of their way to seem knowledgeable, it could backfire because there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, and we want to avoid the latter. But we do appreciate when someone shows initiative, right? Getting contact information, setting up dates, initiating plans, all things that communicate confidence and competence. So, related to both the warmth and kindness and the confidence and competence clusters here, there have been some researchers who have studied the extent to which women prefer dominant men or nice men, right? So, which of those do we find to be more important? Already, we have a limitation in this question, in that not all women are attracted to men and vice versa. And we're assuming these characteristics are somehow inherently feminine and masculine, which likely isn't true. Regardless, it's probably not terribly surprising that both warmth and kindness and confidence and competence are important. Across multiple studies, women found men who were altruistic or nice or likable, but not competent, or they were unassertive, to be unattractive. But they also found men who were dominant and not very nice or likable to be unattractive, right? So perhaps it's a balance between kindness and competence. So, in other words, you've heard people say, she's very nice, but she's not someone that you're going to push around, right? So, this is somebody who has a bunch of positive, agreeable qualities, but who also is assertive enough and confident enough to not get walked all over. So it's probably a combination of the kind of two clusters of characteristics that we find attractive. Playing hard to get is something else we might consider in the another person. So this is being selective or picky in who you date, or acting less interested than you actually are, right? So the question is, does that work? Will you be successful in attracting another person if you play hard to get? The answer is sort of. So when the person is moderately selective, it can be effective, but not as much when they're either very selective, right? So they're not at all attainable, or they're not at all selective, which means they're too easily attainable, right? So ideally, you're trying to obtain the best partner possible. But if someone's too easily attainable, you may not think you're aiming high enough, right? Um, and you may be particularly attracted to someone who seems to be easy for you to initiate a relationship with, but harder for others, because this makes you seem cooler. People are likely to be more impressed by your ability to attract a very high quality partner. To be very clear about this, I am not justifying the behavior of people who continue to pursue and harass someone who says they're not interested. You should not assume someone is playing hard to get if they say, no, leave me alone. You should take that no for an answer. And if they are interested, then they'll eventually let you know. I linked an article from Psychology Today that summarizes some of the research on this phenomenon, and there are a few key items that I would like to share. So, first, researchers asked participants to list the behaviors that they use when they are playing hard to get and how often they use them. So, things like limiting self disclosure, talking to or flirting with, or even dating other people than the intended target, acting sarcastic but friendly, taking a long time to respond to texts and calls, so on and so forth. So that list, there was a list of 58 total behaviors, and the researchers categorized them in these 5 groups here. And they also asked people why they play hard to get. And there were 2 primary reasons that emerged. Um, the first is that they wanted to increase demand for themselves to make someone want them more. And some people also said they used or they played hard to get to test a partner's level of interest in them and willingness to commit. Now, importantly, these motivations were more likely to be held by participants who already perceived that their mate value was high, right? So, in other words, they believed themselves to be a good catch. They were also more likely to be used by people uh, with narcissistic or manipulative personalities. So the results also showed that participants preferred very easy to get partners for short term sex, but preferred partners who were moderately selective for dates and relationships. So playing hard to get is probably something I would not recommend. I think, if personally speaking, like this is my personal opinion, just being open and honest and very clear about your intentions is probably more effective than engaging in a number of behaviors that are potentially manipulative um, and can, maybe inhibit relationship development. So, again, there's an article on Husky CT about this. So, if you want to read more about it, feel free to check that out. We have discussed qualities of you, so your personal qualities that influence attraction, and qualities of the other person that influence attraction. So now we're moving on to qualities of the pair. And you've probably heard 2 competing adages: birds of a feather flock together, and opposites attract. So, which one of these is true? Are we more attracted to similarity, or are we more attracted to difference? We're going to figure that out over the next few slides. We will start with similarity, right? So you often hear people say things like, oh, there's definitely chemistry between us, or we just really click. One of the strongest aspects of this sort of kind of vague idea of chemistry is the degree of similarity between 2 people. So think about the people that you like the most, the people you are closest to. Maybe a best friend, certain family members, previous and current romantic partners, and ask yourself, are you exactly alike? And of course, your answer is no. But I'm willing to bet you are pretty similar in a number of ways. So, first, you might have demographic similarity, right? So, similar background, similar age, you go to the same school, things like that. When you first meet someone, you may feel uncertain about them, and so you start seeking information. You ask them questions to gather information and find areas where you are similar, right? For example, let's say someone says their birthday out loud. So they say, oh, my birthday is March 15th. And you go, oh my God, my birthday is March 12th. Or some of you might say, ooh, I'm a Pisces too. And those aren't the same, right? March 12th and March 15th, two different dates. But we are so drawn to similarity that we latch onto those things because it's a way to connect, even if on a superficial level. This is probably also why social media platforms show you mutual friends and followers, and and things people in your network have liked or viewed, right? It's a way to connect with another person or to reinforce that connection with another person. Second, we may be especially attracted to people with similar attitudes, beliefs, values, opinions, right? And this is because these people reinforce our worldview and make us feel like we do hold the correct perspective or the right opinion. This is supported by something called the reinforcement model. So, this model acknowledges the fact that we don't really like when people challenge our beliefs or make us feel like we could be wrong. So, we like people who agree with us. Now, unfortunately, this has the potential to create an echo chamber, both online and offline, which can limit your worldview, but that's a separate conversation. But when you do hold really strong beliefs about something and someone challenges that, you maybe want to argue with them or they want to argue with you. And so dissimilarity here can create conflict, which would be exhausting if you were constantly arguing with a romantic partner or a best friend. Right? So you're not terribly likely to initiate or continue a relationship with someone who is wildly different from you on your most core beliefs. You've probably heard of people separating because of quote unquote irreconcilable differences, right? And so that's just another example of that. We also tend to be attracted to people who are similar to us in terms of physical attractiveness, which has been studied in a number of different types of relationships, not just romantic ones. This is predicted by the matching hypothesis, which I know you learn about in COM 1000, so I will not belabor this point here, but the hypothesis predicts that we don't necessarily aim for people who are more attractive than us. We aim for a partner who is similarly attractive. This does contradict what we spoke about earlier when we said we are physically attracted to, or sorry, when we are attracted to physically attractive people. That is still true, but there's a sort of tension that exists between what's ideal and what's realistic. Ideally, we'd aim for the most attractive partner, but attractive people have more options and can be more selective. So we tend to aim for a partner who would realistically be interested back because pursuing a relationship takes effort and we want that effort to be worthwhile, right? So you're more likely to aim across, so to speak, rather than to aim high for someone that you maybe consider to be out of your league because your chances of success for aiming too high are smaller than aiming for someone who is kind of more similar to you. There are a number of really good arguments in favor of similarity promoting attraction. But what about differences or complementarity, right? So, do opposites attract? There is some truth to this idea, but the short answer is not really. So, we can appreciate when a friend or a partner complements us in different ways, right? So let's say you're more quiet and reserved, and your best friend is more extroverted, which can benefit both of you in different ways. But similarity is a better predictor of liking when it comes to attitudes and values. So you have this best friend who's extroverted and so fun to be around, and they bring you out of your shell and encourage you to try new things, to meet new people, or to do things that maybe you wouldn't do on your own. And if you look at this image on the left here, the rooster is on stilts, which, hey, is helping him see the world the way the flamingo does, right? The flamingo can now introduce him to new things, which is very exciting. But the rooster would get pretty tired if he continued to walk on stilts just to keep up with the flamingo. Or he might decide the flamingo's view actually isn't that great after all. So, for things like behaviors and resources, complementarity can be good, but similarity is more attractive for core values and beliefs. This intersects with that earlier discussion about fatal attraction, right? So the very thing that attracted you to someone in the first place because it was new and different and exciting could ultimately be the thing that tears the relationship apart. Now, as college students, the good news here is that you may be looking for something more short term, in which case, explore what makes you excited. When you're ready to commit to long term, I suspect it will be similarity that becomes more important to you if it hasn't already. Features of the physical environment can also, not surprisingly, influence attraction. Environments that encourage face to face interaction and close proximity, right? So, physical closeness between people are more likely to facilitate kind of those more intimate interactions. If the atmosphere is cozy, there's soft lighting, soft music, those things will all promote closeness and maybe even calmness and comfort, right? People can relax, they can let their guard down, they can get close to one another. Now, compare that to a space where the music is loud, the lights are strobing, you have to talk really loud to be heard. There might be fewer places to sit, or there are only large tables for groups, right? And the seats are mostly stools, so everything's less comfortable. That might still promote closeness, but it may be a different kind of closeness. So I've put images up here of different spaces. And I think the one in the middle and the one on the right are kind of more likely to promote that intimate, close feeling. Everything's kind of cozy, comfortable. Um, and then the bar on the left, you either have bar stools or you have these large tables that are meant for groups, right? I imagine the floor in that bar is sticky. Um, so not to prioritize one environment over another. It just kind of depends, I think, on what it is that you're looking for. But yes, features of the actual physical environment can impact your attraction to another person. Characteristics of the physical environment can also lead us to um, have certain emotional experiences or feel certain ways because because of what we're experiencing in a particular setting. So this can influence attraction, and it's usually because we misattribute the cause of the emotional arousal to a source that it did not originate from, right? This is not necessarily something that you do consciously, but you may have heard of excitation transfer and the experiment called the rickety bridge experiment or the suspended bridge experiment, depending on which study you read. So, this experiment asked participants, and they were all men, to cross either a rickety suspended bridge or a stable bridge, right? So, there were two groups of participants. One crossed the stable bridge, one crossed the unstable bridge. Once they got to the other side, there was a research assistant who was either a man or a woman. And that research assistant told the participant to write a story, and then the research assistant gave the participant their phone number and said, you can call me at home if you have questions about the experiment. So participants who crossed the rickety bridge and spoke to a woman used more sexual imagery in their stories and were more likely to call her at home. So, what happened here is these men experienced high levels of arousal related to fear from crossing the bridge, right? The rickety bridge. But they attributed that arousal to the research assistant. This might happen if you watch a scary movie, you go to a haunted house, you ride a roller coaster, right? You will experience these heightened physiological arousals, which may then be transferred to the person you're with, in that you may feel attracted to them in that particular moment. Proximity or physical closeness has been studied very widely as an environmental factor that promotes attraction. There are a number of studies that essentially converge around the idea that where you live, where you work, where you go to school, so on and so forth, play a significant role in who you like. And by who you like, I mean who you are most likely to be friends with and who you are most likely to date. And this, I think, makes a lot of sense, a lot of practical sense, because these are the people you spend the most time with. These are the people you see regularly. There are plenty of opportunities to hang out with someone who lives in the same dorm as you, goes to the same school as you, lives in your hometown, right? And there's a lower barrier to entry. It's really convenient to get together with these people compared to, making plans with someone who is geographically more distant. Technology certainly helps bridge the physical distance barrier to some extent, but proximity is still a pretty strong predictor of attraction. Finally, it should come as no surprise that your social environment influences who you're attracted to. So often, we like the same or very similar things as our friends and family members. So, getting positive feedback from the social circle about who we hang out with and who we date can promote attraction. In our, I'll say, increasingly digital environment, we might check a person's social media presence to see if they're connected to anyone we know. And hopefully, you don't do the embarrassing thing I recently did and ask them about it, especially since Facebook, in this scenario here, has been around for nearly 20 years and people have been Facebook friends um, that they no longer speak to. So, yes, I recently connected with someone on Facebook, saw that she had two mutual friends, and then I asked her about it, and she was like, yeah, that was a long time ago that I spoke to those people. So, anyway, seeing that overlap, right, between people you know and people another this other person knows might make that person more attractive to you, and certainly gives you plenty of chances to gain information about them, which also helps to reduce your uncertainty about them, which we'll learn about later on. um, Now, of course, we don't always base attraction on approval. Oh, there may be times when your friends may wonder what exactly you see in a potential partner, and your parents may tell you that you can't be friends with someone or date someone for various reasons. So, in some cases, that feedback will maybe influence you to stop hanging out with that person because the opinions of your loved ones are actually pretty important. But in other cases, it might actually make you more attracted to that person, which is what we call the Romeo and Juliet effect. So, for the non Shakespearean folks here, Romeo and Juliet were children in two families who basically hated each other. And so, when Romeo and Juliet fell in love, their families disapproved of that relationship and told them they couldn't be together. And so, they hatched up a plan that failed miserably, arguably due to poor communication, and they both ended up dead. So, that concludes the unit about attraction. Your challenge now is to try to connect some of the information from this unit with information from other units because I covered a lot here. So you'll be able to connect some of what we've discussed with our conversation on identity. And you should also be able to connect information from this unit to subsequent units, like uncertainty, managing self disclosure and privacy, relationship maintenance, relationship development, attachment, so on and so forth. So, this is one of those units that you should be able to find some interesting connections as you progress throughout the semester.